which is the project area, and the small crosshatch subdivided pieces will be conveyed to the Marlton Square Shopping Center and become part of the shopping center. So that the project area has a solid straight line and conforms with the project area as designated in the redevelopment agreement and redevelopment plan. I would just also note for the record that the redevelopment plan does recognize that part of lot 12.01, which is in the rehabilitation area within the South Maple project area, is currently developed, as I mentioned, with a stormwater management basin, which the redevelopment plan concludes is an underused basin. The inclusion of this portion of the Marlton Square lot was determined by council to be necessary to create a viable, developable area along South Maple Avenue as envisioned by the redevelopment plan. So once we have put together our proposed lot 16.02, which is an aggregate of 1.54 acres, we then have the application to go forward for both subdivision and lot consolidation, as I have explained. We're also seeking tonight preliminary and final major site plan approval. In addition, with regard to lot 12.01, which is the Marlton Square Shopping Center parcel, that parcel abuts the rehabilitation area and it is affected by the redevelopment plan. That property is within the Evesham Crossroads Overlay District. And that property has several items of existing non-conforming conditions that I bring to the attention of the board. Although we are not seeking relief, previous relief was granted with regard to these existing non-conforming conditions, but I bring them to the attention to the board so the board can recognize that those conditions do exist on lot 12.01. And those conditions relate to minimum lot depth, minimum side yard, minimum front yard parking setback, and minimum buffer to adjacent non-residential properties. None of those existing non-conforming conditions are affected by this application. In addition, there are several design waivers with regard to lot 12.01. That lot, 12.01, as shown on the subdivision exhibit, is going to be made smaller by virtue of the subdivision. And therefore, there are conditions that will become non-conforming as a result of the existing structures and improvements which currently exist on the Marlton Square Shopping Center lot. Those existing buildings and improvements will not be changed by this application. And those design waivers that we are seeking for those decreased conditions relate to the minimum rear yard, the maximum impervious coverage, the maximum floor area ratio, and the minimum buffer of adjacent residential properties of 4 stories or more. In addition, you will hear testimony that on the newly created lot, lot 16.02, there is one design waiver, which relates to a requirement that the last parking stall in a row must be separated from the drive aisle by a planting aisle. And you will hear testimony with regard to the manner in which that condition will be handled on the plan. Finally, we are seeking approval from this board to terminate an existing document, which is a recorded document that is called the Amended and Restated Mutual Cross Easement for Access and Parking and Right of First Refusal. It's dated June 24th of 2014. The history of that document is that it actually relates back to an original easement agreement entered into in 2003, which provided for cross-access and cross-parking between lots 20.01 and 20.02, 22 and 24 South Maple Avenue. About a year ago, there was an application that was approved by the zoning board that permitted cross-access between the Marlton Square Shopping Center, lot 12.01, and lot 20.01 and lot 20.02, as well as cross-parking. That amended and restated mutual cross-access and parking easement agreement was entered into to document those cross rights between those properties. That plan is not proceeding because our proposed plan this evening is proceeding in lieu of that cross-access plan. The township was made a third-party beneficiary of that prior easement agreement, and therefore the terms of the easement agreement require that before that easement agreement can be terminated, we need the approval of the township, for which we are seeking from the planning board this evening. I'd like to begin my testimony by calling my first witness, Mitchell Davis. Mitchell, you've been sworn in. And can you confirm for the board that you are a member of Marlton South LLC, the designated redeveloper of the South Maple Avenue project area?
Yes, I am.
And is Marlton South LLC the owner or the contract purchaser of the parcels which are the subject of this proposed application and the project area for redevelopment?
Yes.
Could you just briefly give the board a summary of your experiences and background as a developer?
Yes. Davis Enterprises is a locally based company based in Marlton, New Jersey. The thrust of our business is rental investment properties. We have over 2,000 rental apartments. Everyone is probably well known of the promenade at Sagemar. That's also part of our portfolio. We also own a hotel and some office and industrial buildings as well.
And could you provide the board with a brief overview of the improvements that are being proposed on the site plan that's before the board this evening?
Yes.
Excuse me, just 1 second. Mr. Goldstein, since your site plan approval is contingent upon obtaining subdivision approval, do you want to bifurcate that and do that first? In other words, if you don't get your subdivision approval, your project goes away, right? So, I mean, or were you planning on saving that all for the end?
Well, I guess that
if your testimony is going to be
thinking,
intertwined, then we'll just take separate motions at the end.
yeah, I was thinking that really it's intertwined because I think the benefits that are derived by the rehabilitation and the development of this project is part of the justification for the granting of the subdivision.
Okay, so we'll bifurcate the vote at the end. We'll just hear the application in its entirety.
That would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Just before you begin, Mitchell, you're going to use these two exhibits. I just want to enter them into evidence.
There'll be three.
There'll be three.
One.
Okay. So if I may, as Exhibit A4, it is a drawing that is called Maple. It is actually an aerial photograph with an overlay of the project area. It is identified as Maple Avenue Residential, dated February 27, 2015. Prepared by Langen Engineering and Environmental.
What we can do is, we can be back in our seats after you finish. We can pass it along so people can see it in the back.
Or, and move up, please feel free to move up. These guys have seen it all, so they can all move up.
Why can't, you have 3 screens here. Why couldn't they put this on a tablet and throw it up on the screen?
I can't answer that question for you, and it hasn't happened, so this is the way it's going to have to be. Mr. Goldstein, would you clarify the date on that, April 27, 2015? Is that what you said?
That's correct. The other two plans are prepared by Barton Partners. The first is sheet 1 of 1, dated December 10, 2014. And it is a colored rendering of the project. And the next is sheet 5 of 5, dated April 2, 2015.
Mr. Goldstein, the first one was the front elevation, I guess.
Yes.
That's correct. And the second one is the side and rear elevation. So I'll ask if the witness would provide the board with a brief overview utilizing the exhibits that have been entered.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mitchell Davis of Davis Enterprises, representing Marlton South LLC. This evening, I'm going to present to you Jackie's Crossing. Jackie's Crossing is in compliance with the redevelopment plan and design that has been adopted by this township in 2014. Jackie's Crossing is located on South Maple Avenue, directly across from the Board of Education building. It sits on 4 acres, and it will be 55 market rate apartments. Of the 55 market rate apartments, 6 will be 1-bedroom apartments, approximately 960 square feet. There will be 12 2-story apartments that are approximately 1,500 square feet, and 37 2-bedroom flat apartments that are 1,100 square feet. There's going to be 75 surface parking spaces. We will also have 18 garages that will be rented on a first-come, first-served basis, as well as we're going to be providing 6 parallel parking spaces on South Maple Avenue.
I'm going to ask everybody to please keep your thoughts and your comments down so we can get through the presentation. You'll have your opportunity to voice your concerns and questions.
Part of the amenity package that we're providing for the tenants and for the tenants that rent here exclusively are a fitness center and a club room that also has an outdoor patio, as well as an office for the leasing agent. The facade of the building will be brick and some type of composite similar to like a hardy board, as well as asphalt shingles. And that is consistent through all 4 sides of the building. We have met with the neighbor as well, and we have discussed enhancing the left and the right side of the building to make it a little more attractive, and we are in agreement with that, as well as adding additional shrubs from the front to the rear of our property. We are going to be installing a sidewalk that will lead from South Maple Avenue along our property to the Marlton Shopping Center. We anticipate that it'll take approximately 18 months to construct this facility. Thank you.
Mitchell, can you just confirm on the record that if this project is developed, the plan that was previously approved by the zoning board at calendar ZB 1203A with respect to cross-access and parking between lots 12.01, 20.01, and 20.02 will not proceed, and that the amended and restated mutual cross easement for access and parking will no longer have any relevance to this application?
Correct.
And can you confirm on the record that you are familiar with the review memo dated May 27, 2015, which was provided to the board by the fire marshal?
Yes.
And are the comments in that memo acceptable to the applicant?
Into the microphone, please, Mr.
I'm
Davis.
sorry. Yes.
And also whether you are familiar with the environmental review provided by CME Associates dated May 19, 2015?
Yes.
And with the exception of the comment with regard to the preparation of a cultural resource study as part of the environmental impact statement, do you agree with all the comments in that letter?
Yes.
And I would just note for the record, and we can deal with this when you have your professional reviews, that the recommendation for a cultural resource study in that letter is an item that was specifically eliminated under the redevelopment plan section 12D. And so that is why there is no cultural resource study. And I have no other questions for this witness.
So what we'll do, Mr. Wilson, we'll go through all your weaknesses, then we'll go to our professionals.
That's fine, thank you. Then I'd like to call Brian Conlon. Brian, you've been sworn in and you've identified yourself as a project traffic engineer. I'd like to, I'm sorry, the project engineer. I'd like to offer Mr. Conlon as an expert in engineering. Brian, have you been qualified as an expert in Evesham Township before the zoning board on a number of occasions, as well as in other municipalities in the state of New Jersey.
Yes, I have.
And if you would like, I can have Mr. Conlon provide a brief overview of his professional background and criteria.
Sure.
Brian Conlon, again, for the record, C-O-N-L-O-N, with Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. I have a Bachelor of Civil Engineering degree from Villanova University. I'm a senior associate at Langen, and I've been with Langen actually 17 years, May 18th, so just over 17 years. And as Mr. Goldstein says, I am a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, and I have testified before numerous boards in New Jersey as well as the Evesham Township Zoning Board.
Thank you, Brian, we'll accept you as an expert in your.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, in your capacity as the project engineer for this application, are you familiar with both the subdivision and site plans and with the project area?
Yes.
And could you provide the board with a brief overview of the site plan that is before the board this evening, highlighting the relief that we are seeking? Before you begin, I'd just like to enter as Exhibit A7. This is an aerial photograph with, I don't know how to describe that, yellow designations of property lines. It is identified as Maple Avenue Residential Existing Aerial. It is drawing EX-A2. And it is dated May 28, 2015.
And again, I'll just elaborate on the site plan that, I know this is difficult, that Mitchell just went through. And this aerial I wanted everyone to see is the existing conditions, what we're doing out here. Again, Mr. Goldstein opened with, there's 4 lots as part of this, and ultimately there'll be 2 lots as part of the subdivision. Our lot for the proposed site plan being 1.5 acres. Those 4 lots, there's to the north, there's a building that's actually been demolished. This aerial is old, it's now a gravel lot. And working our way south, there's part of the Marlton Square Shopping Center, which is the stormwater basin that was referenced. And there's 2 additional lots that are 2 office buildings today, and there's also an additional shed. So as part of our site plan approval, we'll be demolishing all the existing features, which it's about 7,000 square feet of demolition. That's 2 buildings and a shed. I'm going to go to the site plan. And this drawing is actually part of the packet that was submitted to you folks. It's entitled...
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're gonna rely on it, we are gonna mark it.
Yep.
Okay.
What would this be? Rick?
A8.
A8, and it's entitled, the project is Maple Avenue Residential. The plan is entitled Site Construction Plan, drawing number CS-101, and it is dated, the last dated revision date is May 20th, 2015.
Can you give me the original date too?
The original date is March 31st, 2015. And again, this is our proposed site plan. Just to elaborate a few things, we have the L-shaped building that we're proposing. The first floor is about 18,000 square feet. In addition to that, there's the amenity space that's in the northwest corner of the site. That's about 2,600 square feet. As Mitchell said, we are proposing 75. The driveway to the site is the southernmost. We kept it away from the intersection as far as we can from Oak Avenue and from Main Street. So we have one driveway access to the site. It takes you to the rear, where there's 75 surface parking spaces and 18 parking garages that you can enter from the back of the building. And then as mentioned, there's the 6 on-street parking spaces on South Maple Avenue. In addition to that, just some amenities we're proposing. We're actually continuing the sidewalk. There's a 6-foot brick sidewalk along Maple Avenue that we're continuing with our proposed development. There'll be a new crosswalk across the driveway. And again, as mentioned, we'll be having a pedestrian connection from Maple Avenue out to the Marlton Shopping Center via a sidewalk along the southern property line. With regard to the site plan, there's not much else. Just some other things, utilities. We're coordinating with the MUA for public water and sewer. Landscaping, we have a proposed landscaping plan. We're proposing 9 shade trees, 8 evergreen trees, and over 115 shrubs, and there's throughout the proposed development. And that's really it from that. And the last thing, the tricky thing about this site was the stormwater management. Again, I mentioned there's an existing stormwater basin that we're basically filling in. It's the upstream end of the stormwater management basin for the shopping center. So as part of this development, we're filling in that basin. And just downstream of our site in the basin, we're basically widening or making that basin bigger to accommodate the volume we're filling in. So that's accommodating the volume we're losing for the existing stormwater system. And then we also have, what you don't see under the parking lot, there's a proposed subsurface stormwater management system which is going to treat the new development. So there's a new impervious area and that subsurface system is treating that. Those two things will combine, will discharge back into the existing stormwater system and then head downstream like existing conditions. We're meeting all our requirements for water quality and stormwater quantity and quality. And that's, I'm going to leave it at that. Yes, and the question was to explain the Maple Avenue parking. We are proposing 6 parking spaces, parallel parking spaces. We're bumping out the curb line. The existing curb line is staying the same. We've worked with the county and the township on this, and we're basically bumping in the curb line about 12 feet to provide 8 foot wide by 23 foot long parallel spaces. And they're located basically to the northern end of the building. Just inside, just north of the driveway.
Brian, can you confirm for the board that the plan that has been presented to this board was designed and prepared to comply with the requirements and standards of the South Maple Avenue Project Area Redevelopment Plan?
Yes, it has.
And I'd just like to focus, if I may, on a few of the particular comments in some of the board's professional review letters. In the review letter from the board's planner, there is a recommendation that a bicycle rack be added to the plan. Can you respond to that?
Yes, we will add the bicycle rack, will comply.
And there are a number of landscaping and lighting recommendations. Are all of those recommendations acceptable?
Yep, we will comply with all those.
There's also a comment with regard to the trash enclosure and a request that we confirm that the enclosure will be large enough to contain dumpsters for both trash and recyclables. Could you address that?
Yes, we received a comment about the size of the trash enclosure. We didn't size it out yet. Right now we have 11 feet on our plan. If the enclosures happen to be larger than that 11 feet, we'll end up losing 1 parking space, but we will accommodate the necessary requirement. And I just want to point out that 1 parking space, we're still over our required parking. We currently have 99 where 92 are required. So we still have 7 excess, so we can afford to lose a parking space if we need to. But we will comply with the comment.
In all other respects, are the comments in the Bach Associates letter with regard to planning acceptable?
Yes.
I'd like to then focus your attention on the May 27, 2015 review letter from Adams, Raymond, and Hagan on behalf of the board. There's one particular comment under comments, section A, traffic circulation. There was a question with regard to the site distance for entering vehicles to be able to see a car exiting the garage. Could you advise the board as to how that concern has been addressed?
Yes, that was an initial comment we did address in our latest submission. And what we proposed, actually 2 things. We extended our curb as you're coming into the site, and this is in the southernmost corner of the building where the first garage is. We basically extended the throat length, if you will, for the curb into the site, and in addition to that, we also added a 4-foot no parking lane against the garages, which basically give the garage an appeal of another 4 feet. And we believe that satisfied the engineer.
Yes, it did. I was concerned about somebody backing out of the garage as somebody was coming in. By extending the curb, we give the person coming in proper notice that somebody is doing a maneuver there. I think that would resolve our question on our report.
Thank you. Brian, in all other respects, is the review letter from Adams, Raymond, and Hagan acceptable?
Yes.
I'd also like to focus you, Mr. Davis mentioned that there were discussions with the adjacent property owner, the owner of Mr. Malloy, the owner of the Reuben Sparks building. And as a result of those discussions, there are some plan modifications made. I'll have the architect address the architectural changes, but can you address the site plan concerns and changes?
Yes, there was one comment, and this is for the southern side of the building, about adding additional landscaping possibly along our southern property line. Currently on the plan, we have about half of the property line where the parking spaces are, with low 36-inch, I forget the name of them, shrubs. But we have agreed to continue that row all the way to the Maple Avenue, basically, so our entire property line will be covered with those shrubs to prevent people walking to the adjacent property. And the other comment was about adding the sidewalk connection between the two, between our development and the shopping center, about adding possible pedestrian lighting, and that actual comment was already addressed. We've actually added 2 bollard-type lights, light standards, 42 inches high, that'll be adjacent to the sidewalk to give it a nice scenic, pedestrian-friendly feel, and safety as well.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. I'd like to call Robert Cogan. Before I have Mr. Cogan qualified, I'd just like to note that reference is being made here to 2 exhibits that were previously entered. Page 1 of 1 is Exhibit A5. Sheet 5 of 5 is Exhibit A6, already marked. And the third is Sheet 2 of 5, dated April, it's called the first floor plan, South Maple Avenue Development, and it is dated...
I'm sorry, Mr. Goldstein, I can't hear you.
It's dated April 2, 2015, revised May 19, 2015.
And what's the title of that?
The title is First Floor Plan, South Maple Avenue Development, Sheet 2 of 5.
That's A9.
Mr. Cogan's already been sworn in. Bob, I'd like to offer Mr. Cogan as an expert in architecture. Bob, can you both provide the board with a brief overview of your professional background and experiences and confirm as to whether you have been qualified by either the Planning and or Zoning Board of Evesham Township in the past and other planning or zoning boards in the state of New Jersey as a qualified expert in architecture?
Okay. Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in architecture from Virginia Tech. I've been practicing for 33 years. I'm a principal in the firm of Barton Partners Architects Planners, Inc. I'm a registered architect in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Virginia, and the state of New Jersey. And yes, I have appeared before some boards in Evesham. I don't remember if it was planning or zoning on 2 occasions. And I have testified, have been qualified to testify in the state of New Jersey and in 2 to 3 dozen municipalities.
We'll accept Mr. Cogan as an expertise.
Thank you. Bob, in your capacity as a project engineer, have you been directly involved in the design of this project?
Yes, I have.
And can you provide the board with an overview of the design and specifically addressing materials and colors used in the design?
Right. Yeah, I won't repeat the things that Mitch will introduce. I'll just kind of add on to those. Relative to the front elevation, we are using 2 different colors of brick. That brick is varying in height. Sometimes it's 1 story tall, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3 stories tall. We're also using 4 different colors of a composite or fiber cement type siding, and 2 of those, of those 4 colors, we're using 2 different sizes of exposure. In addition to that, we have dormers, pent roofs, standing seam metal roofs at some of the entrances. We have angle bay windows, we have Juliet-type balconies, and such. All of those things we've used in a mixture, if you will, to help break the building up so that it appears as smaller elements. And I'd like to add that a key feature of the design is, in fact, that all of the first floor units are what we call direct entry. They all have sidewalks to their front door. They have sidewalks and front doors essentially on the street. So it's not just a common entrance. There is a common entrance, of course, at the front, accessible from the sidewalk. But if you own one of the two-story towns, you have a direct entry as well. Okay.
Internal?
Yes, now if we go to the...
I mean, the direct entry for the two-story is internal?
There's a direct entry, and once you're in your unit, you have your own staircase.
Gotcha.
Correct,
Okay.
internal. And now I'm referring to the first floor plan, sheet 2 of 5.
It's Exhibit A9.
And what is indicated here is that the brownish color are the individual first floors of the two-story townhome-like units. I'm now pointing to the individual porches and entries for those. In the center, which I'm pointing to now, is the common entry. There's a lobby. But we also have a common entry lobby from the rear, which is where the majority of the parking is coming from. And then in addition, in gray are the 18 private garages. And in the lavender color is the amenity space that Mitchell had described. Another interesting feature, I think, of the design is that all of the first floor units are, in a very traditional sense, in a very town-type sense, are raised up about 2 foot 4 inches above grade. It helps people who live in a first floor of a unit to have an extra sense of security living on the ground floor. Let me just get the rear elevation. Let me add one thing to the first floor plan to address a question that was in the engineer's report relative to accessibility. Because we're entering a grade on the rear and we're entering up some steps on the front, we actually have a two-sided elevator. First off, I should have said, it's an elevator-served building. It's an elevator-served building. The elevator will meet all the codes, the new codes, as has been pointed out by the fire marshal as well. But the two-sided elevator will allow accessibility. Anyone with accessible needs or challenges can get anywhere in the building. In addition to that, in the lavender area, there's a ramp that also makes up that change in grade, and that ramp will meet the building codes. And now I'm referring to sheet 5 of 5, which is the rear and side elevations. What we've done here is that we mentioned that there's 3 colors of siding and 2 colors of brick. Whatever the end unit was on the front, that same color scheme then wraps around the side and wraps around the back. What I'm pointing to now are the 18 individual garage entrances. Here, what I'm now pointing to is the main entrance, if you will, from the parking area. What we also have here, in addition to 2 colors of siding and some bands and such, we have 18 recessed balconies. You might notice the balconies were not on the front elevation. Again, we're trying to make the front elevation much more traditional and older looking, if you will. So we introduced the balconies on the rear units only, and we have enough of them to satisfy the requirement in the redevelopment plan.
Bob, one other question. We touched earlier on the modification to the plans as a result of discussions with the abutting property owner. Can you touch on the architectural change in order to address the concern of the adjoining owner?
Yes, and this drawing 505 it does reflect that. This was the modifications I'm going to point out to were not sent into the township, but I'll point out the subtle revisions. What we did as the front unit turns the corner, we enhanced the size and the thickness of all the window trim so that what you see on the side elevation, it was a little fuzzy in our drawings, now matches exactly, so that the same, when you look at a building obliquely, you see the same exact window trim. But perhaps more importantly, we've added a 2-story angled bay, or I'm sorry, box bay window that does a couple of things. It provides some relief, provides some shadowing because it sticks out 1 foot, provides a little bit of a difference in color, and just as an interesting point. So the combination of those 2 things are what we're proposing. We're doing the same exact thing on both side elevations. So as the building turns the corner, we have some interesting architectural elements.
Thank you. And finally, I would ask if you can confirm whether the plans that you have provided and presented to the board this evening are in conformance with the criteria and standards as set forth in the redevelopment.
Yes, they do.
Thank you. I have no other questions of this witness. I do have one other witness, but before I go to that last witness, I'd like to, if I can, recall Mr. Conlon. There is one area on the engineering plan that I just want to visit that I failed to raise previously.
Okay.
And I'm bringing back up the site construction plan, CS 101. I forget the
Exhibit A8.
A8.
Brian, if you can, for the board, I mentioned in my introductory remarks that there are a few design waivers at lot 12.01 because of the decreased area of that lot in order to create the project area. And also there's one new design waiver at lot 16.02. Could you just touch on those design waivers for the board and explain what it is that we're seeking in terms of that relief?
Yes, and I'll start with the lot 12.01, which is the shopping center lot. And the first one, the ordinance requires that the minimum rear yard be 50 feet. The proposed subdivision and lot consolidation results in a setback of 34.5 feet from the proposed relocated rear property line. So a design waiver is requested. And again, by this property line where previously it was fronting Maple Avenue had now come in, so it's closer to the rear of the shopping center buildings. The second one, the ordinance requires that the maximum impervious cover be 70%. The proposed subdivision and lot consolidation results in a decreased lot area for lot 12.01. So a design waiver is requested to permit an impervious coverage of 71.1%. And again, because the lot is getting smaller, the impervious coverage is getting greater. The third is the ordinance requires that the maximum floor area ratio be 0.15 for one-story buildings. And again, our subdivision and consolidation results in a decreased lot area for lot 12.01. As such, a design waiver is requested for a floor area ratio of 0.189. Again, that's a result of the decreased lot area of the shopping center. And finally, for that lot, the ordinance requires that the minimum buffer to adjacent residential properties of 4 stories or more be 75 feet. Because of the subdivision, again, we have a 2.9-foot buffer from the relocated rear property line.
And Brian, each of these design waivers, can you confirm that they are a result of the fact that lot 12.01 is a already developed lot with existing structures and improvements that is being diminished in size, and therefore these create nonconformities that result from those existing structures and improvements?
That's correct, yes.
And in your professional opinion, is it impractical or impossible to comply with the criteria in these particular areas?
Yes, there's no development happening on this. It's a result of the subdivision.
Thank you.
And then there is one design waiver requested on our proposed lot, and that is that the ordinance requires that the last parking stall in a row shall be separated from drive aisles by a planting island, a minimum of 9 feet in width. In the two areas we do provide 9 foot in width at the two end islands, I'll call them, the long row that's right in the center of our parking lot. And due to maintenance concerns and the trucks traveling around, emergency trucks and things of that nature, we proposed originally just a painted striped island. In working with your professionals, we actually came up with not a raised curved island, but like a stamped asphalt pattern end island instead to give it some appeal.
Thank you. I think that's it. If I may, I'd like to call the next witness, Alan Lothian. Alan, you've been sworn in. I present Mr. Lothian as an expert in traffic engineering. Alan, can you provide the board with a brief overview of your professional background and qualifications, and confirm as to whether you have been qualified as an expert at planning or zoning boards in the state of New Jersey?
Hello, my name is Alan Lothian. I work at Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. I'm a project engineer, and I've been working there for approximately 17 years. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Rutgers and a Master's in Transportation from NJIT. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, and I've been before the zoning board in Evesham and many other boards in the state of New Jersey.
We'll accept Alan as a traffic officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan, are you familiar with the traffic evaluation that was prepared by Langen dated March 31, 2015?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with this application and the project site?
Yes, I am.
Could you provide the board with a brief overview of the findings and conclusions as a result of that traffic evaluation?
Yes, as part of this project, we were asked to look at the weekday morning, evening, and Saturday peak hours, and how this project would affect the intersections of our site driveway with South Maple and the intersection of South Maple with Main Street. We looked at both of those intersections, and we did a trip generation for the 55 units and found that there would be 31 peak hour trips in the morning, 48 peak hour trips in the evening, and 42 peak hour trips on Saturday. When split either way on Maple, there would be one trip every 4 minutes in any one direction on South Maple Ave. So as part of that, we distributed that to both the site driveway intersection and the Main Street and South Maple intersection, and found that there was no perceptible increase in level service or delay.
Oh my God.
All right, please keep it down. You'll have an opportunity to speak and question the issue.
And the site driveway would operate at a level service C exiting the site and level service A entering the site. We were also asked to look at the site circulation and parking, and as testified to by the engineer, we located the driveway as far south as possible on the site to get it as far away from both the Main Street intersection and Oak Avenue. The intersection has been designed to process vehicles safely and efficiently, and the circulation through the site is efficient and has also been designed for emergency vehicles. And the parking meets the requirements of the redevelopment plan.
Are you familiar with the review letter provided by the board's traffic professional from ERI dated May 22, 2015?
Yes, I am.
And are the comments provided in that letter acceptable?
Yes, they are.
And finally, in your professional opinion, if this project is developed, will it provide safe and acceptable traffic conditions without adverse impact on internal circulation and
Please
public
Yes.
refrain from comment. Public, you will have an opportunity to speak. You're interrupting the application. It's not fair to the applicant. I ask you to just please keep your comments to yourself. If you want to talk about it or make a comment before the public hearing portion, then please take yourself outside. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions of this witness.
I'd like to add one more thing, actually two more things. In the review letter from the traffic reviewer, they did ask for testimony with respect to the site distance coming out of the driveway and the queuing that occurs from the Main Street intersection. And we do agree that at times during the peak hours that the queues may extend to our site driveway, and we're relying for the left turns exiting. Vehicles may have to wait exiting the site for available gaps, courtesy gaps from vehicles along Maple Avenue. And in addition, we're also asked to identify the difference between the use that's currently on site and what's proposed. And essentially, they have the same peak hours, the AM and the PM peak hour. Difference is the office use that's currently there has more of an influx in the morning and an outflux in the evening, and it's just reversed for the residential development.
Thank you. Nothing further. That concludes my witnesses.
Okay, we'll call our professionals first, and then we'll open up for comment. Start with you, Leah.
Thank you, Chairman. You have my review letter. It's dated May 22nd, 2015.
A good part of my review letter is really dedicated to kind of telling the story of this redevelopment planning process and the redevelopment and this application for the board's information. So I don't need to reiterate all of that because the applicant has really told the story of how they have gotten to this point. But I think I would like to just mention a couple of things because there's a large number of people here to hear this application. And when the planning board reviewed the redevelopment plan, which is what, as Mr. Goldstein indicated, governs this site now, and is what the applicant has designed their site to be in conformance with. The planning board discussed that and reviewed it, but it was, maybe there was one or two people in the room at the time. So that redevelopment plan, really, one thing they didn't mention is that there's a broader rehabilitation area that includes roughly 100 lots in the, what we call the historic Marlton Village area. And that was designated, that rehabilitation area, and as an aside, the township has a number of redevelopment and rehabilitation areas now in different distinct areas throughout the township. But the one I'm talking about is the Marlton, we'll call it Marlton Village Rehabilitation Area. And that was designated in April of 2014. So once that was designated, Township Council, the next step is to set about crafting a redevelopment plan to guide redevelopment or rehabilitation of the area. And there was, and as I mentioned, it's about 100 lots, roughly in the vicinity of Maple, the intersection of Maple and Main, including Locust and all the way up to Cooper, or Cooper all the way up to Locust, actually. And essentially, this applicant, Mr. Davis, saw this particular area as an emerging opportunity. So that's why the redevelopment plan for this fairly small area that we call the South Maple Project area was prepared and adopted first. And we thought that was a great idea from a planning standpoint because the idea is to leverage the success of the Marlton Square Shopping Center to catalyze some redevelopment on South Maple. And then we hope the redevelopment of this property will then catalyze additional rehabilitation or redevelopment in the Marlton Village area. So it's kind of, we're looking at one project right now, but it's part of sort of the bigger plan for the area. For years, we've been talking about the opportunities for revitalization of the Marlton Village area. And, it has the bones of what you might consider to be a downtown area. But it doesn't quite have the life that a really successful downtown has, which really requires activity throughout the day. And what Marlton Village has now is some retail activity, quite a bit of office activity, and some residential. And the idea is to kind of bolster the mix of retail, residential, and office and restaurant uses so that throughout the day there's a variety of activities going on in downtown. So that just sets the stage for that. And a big and important part of successful downtown that has been exhibited time and time again is on-street parking. And that is something that we knew we wanted to have both on Maple and Main Streets in order to make it a successful downtown business district. The way to accomplish that when you have a road that's really too narrow to accommodate it is to bump the curves in. So people, I've heard in, leading up to this tonight's meeting, we've heard people commenting on, well, the road's certainly not wide enough for that and there's so much traffic, why add that to the mix? And the reason is that, as I said, it's well established that in order to have a successful downtown business district, there needs to be on-street parking. The reason is there are a few reasons for it. One is that for the retail uses, which this is not retail, but for retail uses, it's a sense of convenience that people can just pull up and park and go to where they're trying to get to where they're going. And once that sense is there, people will still look for other parking spaces. So they'll still go look for a parking lot if you have good signage, and we're going to be working on that too as part of the overall plan for the area. The second thing is that the on-street parking provides a sense of safety for pedestrians who are walking on the sidewalk. Because when you're walking on a sidewalk and you have a car between you and the traveled way, it feels much safer and more comfortable from a pedestrian standpoint to walk there. So we want to add on-street parking for all those reasons. And this applicant is bumping the curb because there's not enough room there, so they're going to make that room. I just wanted to address that as sort of part of the overall placemaking objectives for the Marlton Village area. As to the specifics of the application, I did outline all the basic, bulk and area standards as I would for a typical site plan in my review letter, and indicated that the applicant complies with those requirements. In their testimony, the applicant essentially agreed to all the comments in my letter, so I don't feel the need to reiterate them point by point. I just want to raise a very few things. With regard to the architecture, Mr. Kogan, this is comment 4 on my letter, which is on page 5. Mr. Kogan indicated that they'll be making some revisions to the side elevations, and he described their intentions for that. So what I would suggest is that if the application is approved, a condition of the approval would be that those revised side elevations be submitted, and that we would work it out amongst ourselves, and if, of course, there was any issue, we could not resolve it, then they would have to come back to the board. Similarly, under number 5, pedestrian amenities, open space, and recreation. One of the requirements of the redevelopment plan was that a sidewalk be provided to connect South Maple Avenue to Marlton Square Shopping Center, and they are providing that. The applicant indicated that they added 2 bollard lights essentially along the path, and I think that's, I had suggested that, and I know that the neighbor, Mr. Malloy, had suggested it as well. I think that that is a great addition, and I think we might need a few more. So if we could just work with the applicant to get that done. I think maybe 2 or 3 more. And the applicant prepared a lighting plan, and that lighting plan shows that the light levels are sufficient. It's not that there's a dark spot that needs to be addressed. It's really just a matter of pedestrian comfort and safety. So I would like to have those added as a condition of any approval. Yeah, I had a number of landscaping comments, and the applicant has agreed to all of them. The only thing I wanted clarification was where the 2 9-foot wide stamped asphalt islands will be provided in the parking area where a landscaped island is required. I just wanted to have affirmation of the reason that that's necessary, because I would prefer the landscaped islands from an aesthetic standpoint, and if the stamped asphalt is certainly an improvement over a striped island, and if it's necessary for traffic and circulation reasons, then I think it could be acceptable from a planning standpoint, but I didn't really hear that it's necessary. I wanted to hear what the reason was.
There are 2 reasons, anyone? One, I know the owner from a maintenance standpoint and plows, and that was one of the reasons. And again, if you look at our truck circulation plan, we do clip the corners of that island as well from the emergency access for the emergency vehicles. So they're the 2 reasons.
Okay, well, we don't want to create improvements that end up looking damaged. So I just wanted to make sure there was a reason for it before I recommend it. Okay, everything else I believe in my letter has been addressed. The enclosure, trash enclosure will be increased in size if necessary, that make sure the dumpsters are inside. There will be no dumpsters permitted to be outside the enclosures. That's typical. The applicant would have to agree to that as a condition of any approval. And the applicant also agreed to add the sign to the plan. So that's all I have for right now. Thanks, Karen.
Anyone from the board has a question for you?
Yeah, I have one question. I'd like to know what the total acreage for the whole project is.
I believe it's 1.54 acres.
1.524.
Thank you.
Yeah, one question. So regarding the parking, so for bumping in the parking, South Maple is a county road, right? So they need to go to the county for the approval, so.
They do, and they have had preliminary meetings with the county, I believe, to get some feedback. And it did change the on-street parking. Initially, they had proposed, ambitiously proposed on-street parking along the entirety of the frontage of the building. And it has been scaled back because of the need to remove it from the area across from Oak Avenue because of, all the conflicting movements in that area. So it's only going to be south of Oak Avenue.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I understand what the town is envisioning in terms of their future plan, we talk about parking on Maple. But since this project is strictly residential without retail, is there really a need to have the parallel parking extended on Maple right in front of this particular building?
Yeah, I think it sets a standard. I mean, the thing with the downtown area is you can't look at any one site in isolation. They all, each impacts the others. So, so for that reason, I think that it's important that we have it here, because, you know, we don't know what other activity may occur on the street, and we want to make sure that it's continuous. Because, you know, when you go to a successful downtown, you don't always park in the spot right in front of the place you're going to. You can park down the street. Additionally, there are an important aspect of this design of the building that was touched on by Mr. Kogan, is that the townhouse-style units will have direct access from South Maple. So if a visitor is coming, for example, to those units, or any of the units, because there'll be an access in the front, they may wish to just park on the street. And the direct access is key, because it really presents a sense of eyes on the street and some street-level activity. And you know, Mr. Kogan indicated that the front doors will be raised up about 2.4 feet, I believe he said. And that's perfect for creating enough distance between the private and the public realm, but still making sure that there's a connection between the two.
Any other questions for the board?
Clear. I had heard testimony that 92 spaces were required, 99 were being provided. Does that difference include the 6 that are on the street, that are in the county right away?
Those are included. We did write the redevelopment plan to enable the new spaces that they create to be counted toward the parking count.
Okay. And then the garages themselves, do they count in that total count? I mean,
They do.
they do. So there's a space, is there a space in front of the garage as well as one in the garage?
In this case, no.
Just the garage. So if they lose one, perhaps because the dumpsters increase in size, and we're just at,
Then they'll be at 98, which is 6 more than is
which is
required.
within 6 more, okay, so 6 apart.
There's 75 surface parking spaces in the rear of the building. So if they have to lose one, they're going to lose one of those, so there would be 74 surface parking, plus the 18 garage and the 6 on street.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, dear?
No, that's it, thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Guerra?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we provided a review letter dated May 19, 2015. Just briefly go over some of the aspects. I'm not going to reiterate everything. Just to confirm that there will be no need for cultural resource survey as part of the redevelopment agreement. The applicants submitted a phase 1 environmental site assessment report, and I enumerated a number of recommendations in that report that applicant is agreeing to follow up and comply with those. I just wanted to make sure that when they hire an LSRP and when they prepare any additional reports, and in the event that the application is approved, we would like to see those reports. They should be submitted to us, and we should be in agreement. And eventually, their professionals has to get the response to action outcome, meaning that there will be no soil or groundwater contamination that exceeding the standards, NJDEP standards, or whatever engineering controls they may have to provide. Also, we were provided with a letter dated May 14, 2015 for the asbestos containing materials were removed from 22nd South Maple Avenue, but I would like to ask the applicant that we would like to have those reports, in other words, for the existing and other structures, the asbestos has to have to be removed and prior to demolition activities. That will be my report, so and all the requirements for the May 19 letter will be addressed by the applicant.
Yeah, with regard to the prior demolition of 22 South Maple, the work was done by a qualified contractor, Hargrove Demolition. So to the extent those reports are available, and I would guess that they are, but I just don't know that as a fact, we're happy to submit them for review. And similarly, to the extent that there is any need to comply with New Jersey environmental laws that does require the oversight of an LSRP, we will do whatever is necessary to comply with applicable law and submit all reports.
That will be condition of approval.
Yes.
Any approval? Thank you. Are you good? Any questions for Mr. Vera from the board? No? All right, I'll go to Mr. Raji.
Thank you. We did have a report dated May 8th, 2015. Subsequent to the issuance of that report, the applicant did revise their site plans in response to the feedback they received from all reports professionals, and we reissued a report dated May 22nd, which basically summarized that just about all the revisions that we requested had been made on the revised plans. We did ask for some additional testimony, which Mr. Lothian did provide. As far as the traffic on Maple, it's a busy road. That's what the traffic study says, and that's what everybody in the audience is going to say. You know, there's about 1,300 cars in the morning, and about the same in the evening that travel during the peak hour on Maple. The applicant did testify that during those peak hours, this development will actually put on 31 spaces in the morning and 48 in the evening onto the road. That's in and out. The impact on the roadway from this development, the applicant did say that it really will have very little impact on the actual roadways based off of just this one development. There's only change in level of service that the applicant provides in their traffic statement is the southbound at the light at Main Street and Maple. That level of service will actually go from a D to an E because currently it's actually just on the cusp of going from D to E. This development may add 2.1 seconds more delay at that light, and that makes it a level of service E. Of all the movements involved at both intersections, the new driveway and the Main Street Maple intersection, that's the one change that would be attributable to this development. The queues are quite likely. We've all been on that road during that time, and this driveway during the heavy peak times, it may actually back up to this driveway, and the applicant's going to rely on courtesy gaps for people exiting the site. But then I guess what the board may consider there is that it's really a nuisance more than anything else to the residents of this apartment complex, and I'm sure Mr. Mitchell's considered that in his decision to develop this, as far as whether that affects marketing or not. And it is a desirable area, and I'm sure that some people may actually be willing to put up with a little bit of a delay getting out of their development. And then same with the parallel parking, actually. There's been some discussion about parallel parking on Maple. Parallel parking is really, as far as the safety concern goes, in my opinion, is more of a concern on higher speed roads. Maple is really a congested road. It's low speed. It's more of a nuisance or inconvenience during peak times to get in and out of those parallel parking spaces, not necessarily a safety concern. So again, people after they've lived in this development or worked in this area will learn or will say, well, maybe I don't want to park in that spot right now because it's going to be difficult for me to get in and out. But that's something that will be adapted to as we go in, as the site is built and we start occupying the apartments. Other than that, the applicant has addressed all of our requests for testimony, and I have nothing further to add, unless I'll be more than happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Anybody have a question for Mr. Lurji from the board? Yes, Mr. Lurji.
Now, Mr. Darji, in paragraph 2 of your letter about the traffic in terms of the generation of trains, do you agree with the numbers that the applicants?
Yes.
So, Mr. Lurji, I have a question. So, currently applicant has 99 parking spaces that is on the plan.
Yes.
Even if they remove one, that they lose one, that will be 98.
Right.
And and that includes the 6 parkings on the Maple Avenue.
That's correct.
Right, so without that 6 parking, the 92 parking spots still meets that requirement, right?
That would comply with the redevelopment, the standards that were set forth in the redevelopment plan, even without those spaces. But as Ms. Fiore testified, those spaces serve a couple of different purposes. Obviously, they provide parking for this development, but then they also serve a purpose that's been envisioned in the redevelopment of this general area.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Raymond?
Yes, we have prepared a report dated May 27th. This is a revision from our May 26th report. That report was issued in draft to Langdon Engineering about 3 weeks ago because of the detailed concern we have about eliminating a detention basin. Where does that water go and how do they handle that so we don't exacerbate any flooding that's on the Oak, and even though Maple Avenue is a county road, we look at that also. We had a couple of items that were in our report on traffic circulation on-site. We left the traffic off-site to Mr. Darcy. And one of the concerns we had was when you're backing out of that entrance, that garage right on the southern part of the building, that there could be a conflict, somebody coming around the building. Mr. Conlon has addressed that by extending the curb so that that works, and I think that was a good solution to the project. We also want to make sure that during the course, if the board chooses to approve this, that the arrangements be made with the Eastern Police Department, because there will be construction traffic. There will be, as we heard, a lot of traffic on Maple Avenue, and that there's going to be safety concerns, and all of that has to be monitored by the Eastern Township Police Department. They're more than able to do that and capable, so I just wanted to make sure those arrangements are taken care of. We do have the handicap access. It's in the back of the building. Nothing is up front because all the access has been testified. It's by steps into the first floor units on the front, so that signage be put on the entrance driveway that in the back spaces are available in the back, so that anybody entering the site knows isn't confused that there isn't handicap space. I think that's a condition, Mr. Goldstein, that you have agreed to. With the explanation by Mr. Condon on the architect, the elevator solves those problems of access, and that's all generated or targeted towards the interior parking lot in the back. So that would be one of our concerns. Obviously, the major portion of this, our review is directed towards the drainage. Presently, the drainage along Oak Avenue and part of Maple Avenue go through the retention basin or detention basin that also has access to the Marlton Square Shopping Center, and that elimination of that basin was done originally by putting 2 underground detention basins through piping. We were concerned about the backwater curve or tailwater that creates onto Maple Avenue and Oak Avenue, and with some give and take with Langdon Engineering and probably 3 different sets of plans. We have eliminated part of that underground basin and left the underground basin only for the impervious cover that's generated by this new improvement. The rest of the water would be bypassed into the Paramount, I call Paramount Square shopping center, with an extension of the capacity of that basin by excavation and constructing some walls on that basin to replace the capacity that's being lost by the elimination of the basin on this particular lot. There will be an easement required, and I did not, Mr. Goldstein, put that in my report, but there will be an easement to make sure all of that can occur and that all parties are part of that agreement.
And we do anticipate that, understanding that the runoff will go to the basin on lot 12.01. There will be a mutually acceptable easement agreement between the property owners, addressing the right for that drainage to occur and addressing maintenance obligations as between the private parties.
And Mr. Goldstein, you would be willing to submit that to my office for just review to ensure compliance with the requirements?
Yes, no problem.
There are still some outstanding items in our report. Most of them are engineering detail. For instance, we think that there should be a heavy-duty grate put on a particular inlet because of the traffic associated with that. That's not, in my view, tantamount to whether the project fails or not. All of those things have been gone over by Mr. Conlon and myself, and they are agreed to. It's just one of the things that's unique about this set of plans is you can't make comments when the plans are not detailed. And the downside of that is when you put a detailed set of plans together that have a lot of information on it, you get to, I get to the point where I can then look at all that detail. There is some grading along the south property line that I don't want somebody walking off the sidewalk and dropping down into an inlet that may be 8-10 inches below the sidewalk. That's going to be taken care of. We've already agreed to that, but that's some of the detail that I have in my report, and I would not have any objection if the board decided to, if you are going to make a decision tonight that this could be done as a compliance item later on. I am convinced that the drainage plan as redesigned will function, will not adversely impact the upstream areas of Oak Avenue. Now, on Maple Avenue, Brian, I believe we have set the limits of the drainage to this site and have accommodated all the water that drains to this site on Maple Avenue and have taken that into consideration.
That's correct.
And that while there may be a drainage issue on Maple Avenue outside of this, that would be a county responsibility, and the county still has to give a review of this plan. You have made an application, Mr. Goldstein, to the county for
Yes,
their...
we have been preliminary discussions.
And the county is part of the easement associated with the current drainage basin, so they are going to have to work with the rights associated with that to agree with the way we have redesigned it and what we have done to make this go through the Paramount Shopping Center basin. We have asked Mr. Conlon for your information as a board to look at what happens downstream. And they have gone through a series of calculations for us to assure us that there will not be any flooding downstream, that the basins have the capacity to take the water. Obviously, most of this is already generated in existing conditions, and what is generated on site will be held within the basin under the parking lot and metered out through a weir structure that will let the first flush of the storm go through, and then this portion of the storm will then follow, so that we can balance the capacities. There's a couple of items about the design of the walls. There's some pipes that come into the existing basin. I want to make sure all of those would not impact the structural stability of the wall. Mr. Collins agreed to provide a little bit more detail on that. All of that would have to be included in any performance guarantee that we would be asking the developer to ensure that all the work that they propose will be done. I'm open for any questions.
Any question from the board for the...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Portman.
Mr. Freeman, I'm confused. Is the only basin of the shopping center the one that's currently on Maple? The service, it's been stated as being underutilized, so I'm kind
No,
of...
there is a basin on the north side of the shopping center that runs almost parallel with Main Street out to 7073. And that water goes, that's the off-site or the downstream issue that I wanted Mr. Conlon to address. Brian, do we have an exhibit that would show that?
I think the aerial would show it.
It's there. The water goes through there now, but it goes through the detention basin. We looked at that when we did the mod pizza, no, that was zoning board, wasn't it? Excuse me.
Behind the parking process.
Yeah, this is a new exhibit. Would be
A10.
It's called Maple Avenue Residential. The drawing title is Overall Aerial. Drawing number EX-A1, and it's dated May 28, 2015. And I previously had an aerial of just our site area. This is actually an area of the entire area, including the shopping center. It goes all the way down to Main Street and 73. And I guess the basin in question, this basin actually starts at that corner of Maple and 73, and it's kind of interconnected as you go up in the rear of the shopping center. And I'm pointing to the long, it's a skinny basin that's at the rear of the shopping center, and ultimately the upstream end of that basin is where we're proposing our development. I think the comment about overutilized or underutilized, this upstream area very rarely gets wet. Basically, it's the extreme upstream of this long basin that acts as one, and that's what we're filling in. But that capacity we are losing, we're increasing this area just downstream for what we're losing upstream. Hopefully that.
And just for the record, I want to clarify, I think you said when you referred to the basin at the north side, the corner of, you said Main and Maple and 73.
Oh,
you
sorry.
meant Main and 73.
That's correct, yes, sorry. Main and 73.
That's what I'm saying, the one that's closest to Main and Maple, I'm sorry, the basin, the smaller, the basin you see on Maple as you.
Across from the school board.
Yes, that's the one that's being filled.
That's the one being filled, and that's the one that is, if you look at the drainage calculations, generally does not get much water and generally is not even wet. But there is a 36-inch storm sewer coming off of Maple that goes along that area into the Paramount Square basin. They were going to take that and put that into an underground basin, which I was concerned that the tailwater elevation would push that water by confining it into Maple Avenue and Oak Avenue, because water drains down from Oak. Leaving it, putting it into the Paramount Square basin and increasing that capacity eliminates that possibility.
And the pervious surface, the runoff for the development will be handled below grade.
That's right, and that will also be connected to the Paramount Square basin, but that will be held back. We take what's called the hydrograph, the storm peaks and then drains off. What we want to do is meter that water out so that it doesn't exceed any of the capacity. That's the design. They've done that by putting a weir structure in that as the water increases, you get more water out, but it holds the water back.
Mr. Cortland, to make it a little bit easier, they're making the existing basin that you see off of Maple. Yes, they're filling that in. But the rest of the basin, they're adding walls to make the capacity of that more. So they're substituting the shallower basin at Maple into a deeper basin behind the buildings that front onto Main. And that's how they're providing their stormwater. There is a small portion that's underground, but pretty much that's taking care of everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Lyman? No, before we open up for the public, we have some things to take care of from Mr. Allen, please.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, Chris, your most recent letter indicated a potential for construction easement for the modifications to the basin on lot 1201 and a block retaining wall design to be approved. I know you mentioned that. I just want to make sure that the block retaining wall issue was going to be something that we would make it a condition of any approval, that issue be worked out with the board engineer And if it can't be worked out with the board engineer, you'd have to come back with whatever alternative design you need.
We understand that, and if my understanding is correct, I think there's already been some discussion with regard to that wall.
Okay, and then,
Yes, it's just details that we need to make sure that the wall will be stable, and I think that's easy enough to provide.
and as that, I think being the end of all the testimony and questioning from everybody, I just want to clarify the other conditions of approval that have not been mentioned, that I pulled out of the review letters, if you don't mind, Mr. Goldstein.
No, not at all.
And I know you've indicated your testimony, the testimony provided has indicated that all the other comments of the board's professionals' reports will be complied with, were acceptable. These are the things that are going to specifically be called out as conditions of approval in the resolution, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Lee mentioned the fence along the property line will be retained and repaired or replaced if damaged. That's acceptable to the applicant?
It is.
Okay. There was a discussion about a permanent trash receptacle within the patio area. Did that get discussed?
They agreed to everything in my letter.
All right, these things, I just want to make sure I'm going to call out specifically as conditions of approval, separate line items. Well, now, I'm getting the applicant right now to acknowledge that these would be conditions, that they would be acceptable conditions. And then if we do, once we get to a motion, I will summarize at that point. I have a list, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Talked about that. Actually, that being said, I think that's it. The only other thing I want to point out to you, Mr. Goldstein, I've reviewed that cross easement document that you've asked the board to approve the determination of. That document was signed on behalf of the township and identifies the township. This board cannot give you that relief. We can't say it's okay. I mean, conceivably, we can say we recommend it, but what we can do is set a condition of approval that you get township council to sign off on that.
That's fine, although I would say that when it was entered into, it was approved by the zoning board and then signed off by the township council after we had discussions with administration.
Yeah, that's traditional. The content usually is, but the agreements actually, the named parties include the township. The planning board doesn't have the authority to give you that relief.
I think that would probably be fine as long as the board would recommend it.
Yes, and that would be fine.
Yeah. Mr. Gordon, you got a question?
I do, and Mr. Doherty, you may have touched upon it in your traffic report. You usually get a fire marshal's report which talks about circulation.
Yes.
We did.
Okay.
The fire marshal issued 2 reports. The first one had a few comments regarding the marking of fire lanes and certain kinds. I think there's some issues related with the building. And the applicant subsequently did revise their plans, and the fire marshal did issue a follow-up memorandum that basically said that their request for the sprinkler system and everything were complied with. The only thing remaining was that the fire lane would be marked out. Should the board act favorably on this application, after construction, they would mark out the fire lane at that time. That would be a condition of any approval the board grants.
Thank you.
Right, so I know some people did not have a chance to look at the plan, so before I open up for the public comment, we take a 5-minute break, we can take a look at the plan, somebody wants to look at it, and then we can start the public comment.